Tons of news today. Well, let's start with this. I know some of you guys hate the leaks and rumors part of all this, but I also know people are very interested in what about like a more affordable new card like a 4060 Ti? What do we know about it? Well, Copite7 Kimmy, our favorite Twitter leaker, has updated his December 13th post with a reply, basically not changing any of the stats we saw other than the power draw and adjusting it to a 160 watt target on the RTX 4060 Ti. Now, the overall specs here, I think, are interesting, especially when you compare them to other cards in the current 4000 series that we have, as well as the previous 3060 Ti. A video cards article on this topic does have a helpful little chart over here. Get out of the way for you. And so here's the rumors. Now let's be clear, these are rumored specs on the 4070 and 4060 Ti. These are not at all confirmed by NVIDIA. NVIDIA has not even confirmed these cards will come out. All we have for sure are the 4070 Ti and the 3060 Ti. But if we now go with what the rumors are stating the specs will be, the 4060 Ti is rumored to be on the 8106 GPU. Remember, the 3060 Ti was on GA104, so, you know, if you're looking at the die type comparison between the generations, it's looking like it'll be a step down. It also looks like the 4060 Ti is rumored to have fewer CUDA cores than the 3060 Ti. Now, that being said, just comparing CUDA cores across generations does not mean that that means the 4060 Ti would perform worse than a 3060 Ti. I just think it's an interesting stat. For one thing, we know that the 4000 series from NVIDIA is able to clock much, much higher than the 3000 series. So even if you had fewer cores, even if the cores perform the same, that doesn't mean having fewer of them means you will perform worse. But it looks like, again, the rumors are pointing to still be at 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 rather than 6X. And then on a 128-bit bus rather than the 256-bit bus from the 3060 Ti, giving it a much lower total memory bandwidth. But the power target is down to 160 watts compared to the 200 watt on the 3060 Ti. So at least that's interesting. Now, when are we expecting these? Again, the rumored production time frame has been February, March, but that's when it enters production, and then it would take weeks or even a couple of months to actually enter the market. So we could still be waiting a while here, and these are still the rumored 4070 specs. So that's where we're at there. Okay, sorry, people who hate leaks and rumors. Let's move along. So this hasn't been in the news for a while, but it's just hitting the you know, Reddit threads and all that again. With the 12VH power cable from NVIDIA, which we'd seen a bunch of news about it, those melting when these first came out. There was a bunch of research done. NVIDIA themselves agreed with the independent research from places like Gamers Nexus, saying that it's just not fully seating the cable, which doesn't excuse a cable design that makes it very easy to not seat properly. But then CableMod's custom cables were reported to maybe be better at some of that stuff and not have the you know, some of the poor design defects, but still they have to use in the end that connector. And we are getting a report of one of the CableMod's custom cables also having the melting issue. Although the card itself was not damaged, and in the Reddit thread, in response, the company did jump in and say that we're very sorry about that. Please reach out to our support and we will make it right with you. Our products come with service and we help every customer out. They say the card is not damaged. They spoke to him, but in case our cables would damage a card, then we would replace the GPU. We have done that in the past in very rare cases where our cables damage something. So if you see this and you're like, I'm not gonna touch any of those CableMod cables or something like that, just be aware that while the user on Reddit does claim that they fully seated the cable until there was a click, just keep in mind that that has been the main issue. It's possible he made a mistake and did not, and CableMods does stand behind their product and say that if it was their fault, they would help replace the GPU if it actually did damage the GPU. So interesting stuff. Now, how are the new cards actually selling for AMD and NVIDIA? Well, it's pretty much impossible to get an accurate count from across the entire world, but this WCCF Tech article is reporting on the sales at Germany's largest retailer, which is Mindfactory. And Mindfactory, one of the interesting things is that they actually actually make public their sales figures. And so, for example, in this recent tweet, they're posting the GPU sales by volume, and they saw the 4070 Ti for that week at 280, the RTX 3060 at 255, the 6700 XT at 180, the 6600 at 130, 7900 XTX entering the chart here at 120, 6800 at 110, and so on and so forth. Now, this WCCF Tech article has gone through and looks like totaled up some individual sales for each graphic card at MindFactory beyond this tweet for where they were at this week, and giving us some more total units sold from MindFactory. So again, this is not representative of the entire market, but I thought it was still some interesting stats. We see the 4090 at a little over 1,500 units sold, the 4080 at a little over 1,600, the 4070 Ti at over 1,700. So even though it came out later, it looks like the 4070 Ti has surpassed the 4080 and 90 in total sales. The 7900 XTX at 1170, and the 7900 XT, so the non-X variant, at over 1800, which actually does surpass any of those other previous models. Now, this WCCF Tech article mentions that, in their opinion, the German market is more open to AMD graphics cards than some other parts of the world, so this might not be indicative of, worldwide total sales and market share and all of that. I can't comment on the German feelings. Maybe your German can let me know in the comment section. The other thing I would mention, though, is just like, I think it's also how many they've been shipped and at what prices, right? Because you can only sell the cards that you have available. So, if you got shipped a whole bunch more XTs than you got shipped XTXs, for example, or if you've been shipped more 4070 Ti's than you've been shipped 4090s, I think that could also have something to do with the total sales numbers. So we shouldn't read too much into any of that, but I thought it was interesting. Now, we're starting to see the new NVIDIA laptops getting some comparisons. Unfortunately, it's still under embargo for exactly when we can get full information on these. Reports are showing that RTX 4090 and 4080 laptop pre-orders might be able to begin on February 1st, although that is not officially confirmed by NVIDIA. It looks like this is coming from IT Home originally, and I'm finding this in a WCCF Tech article reporting on that. So even if that date is off, it looks like at least some tech outlets like Jared's Tech, who I believe does have a bit more of a laptop focus than a lot of the other tech channels, has been given some of the new laptops. Now, in these Razer laptops, he was able to test them out, but is limited by embargo on exactly what kind of information he's able to share. So unfortunately, it looks like mostly DLSS 3 versus DLSS 2 performance numbers in gaming, which, I mean, that's kind of pointless, guys. We know DLSS 3 can increase the number of frames by generating them with some downsides. It doesn't help the input latency. It doesn't, sometimes there can be image quality issues. And overall, I think it's a good feature, but what I mainly hate about DLSS 3 is using it in bar graphs like these. And I'm not blaming Jared's Tech. I believe he's limited by a review embargo on what sort of information is allowed to be shared. Now, what I did think was a little more interesting was Blender results and DaVinci Resolve results. We're seeing over 125% faster at 4K and 8K H.265 video encoding, and some Blender results showing 135% faster, 93.2% faster, and 72.4% percentage difference generation to generation. Of the 4090 versus 3080 Ti, and there was no 3090 laptop. That's why we're up against the 3080 Ti on that version. Anyway, check out Jared's Tech channel if you want a lot more details on all of that. But again, it's a bit limited in what exactly they are allowed to say about all of that. Now, we're also seeing some prices listed for some of the upcoming RTX 40 laptops. It's looking like Video Cards is reporting on pricing from Micro Center, and these look like the MSI models. and they have a 4090 laptop coming in at $4,700. And a cheaper model at only $4,000. It's you know, budget comparison. 4080 laptop at $3,300, a 4070 at $1,700, a 4060 at $1,500, and a 4050 at $1,200. Although there's another version of that with a 4060 at $1,200. So, well, NVIDIA had claimed, I think, that we'd see at least some 4050 laptops starting at $1,000. It's at least, you know, the ones we're seeing listed here, which is not every laptop ever, seem to be starting a bit higher than that. So keep that in mind. Now, in other tests we're seeing on these, again from Jared Tech, who got his hands on some of these MSI laptops, while he couldn't share the graphics performance on the 40 series, one of them did come with an Intel i9-13980HX laptop processor, and so he could share some stats on that, which was quite interesting, and did see it extremely fast, showing over 30,000 points in Cinebench R23. So putting up some big numbers there. Again, I encourage you to take a look at the official, the full videos at Jared's Tech. I will link everything in my description here. And so in other news, we're seeing the, where is it? Clicked on the wrong article. So RTX 4080s, the GPU is the 8103, and it's been the dash 300. But now we're seeing die shots of a dash 301, so a 1 at the end there. And there's been a lot of information swirling around about what exactly is this. Are there any major differences? And this does appear to be a real thing. And apparently, according to the poster who showed the actual die shot, is saying that this has been available for a long time, although that's probably in the Chinese market. Now, this is said to not have any difference in performance at all, some improvements to stability and the like, and I think the main difference is that the voltage comparator is now integrated onto the GPU rather than on the PCB. And this could actually be a small cost savings to the board manufacturers, although it would require a slight redesign to the boards. So I wouldn't really get hung up on whether your board has that or not, but anything that could bring any slight cost savings would be welcome in my opinion. It would be interesting to see if we ever see any of that passed on to the consumer. We do see this being confirmed as shipping in a Gainward card when you look at the specs here. So again, I think some of the other GPUs might also be getting that 1 at the end kind of listing for those specs as well. So anyway, in other news, in my last video, I mentioned that the Intel Core i9-13900KS CPU would be coming out soon. Since then, it looks like it has come out. We have not seen a large number of benchmarks on them, and I don't benchmark CPUs on my channel. But it does look like Hardware Unboxed did get a hold of one and did publish a review on it, but they weren't sampled one by Intel. So it's unclear if Intel will eventually release review samples of these or if it's just up to media outlets to get their hands on one themselves. And the testing is pretty much what everybody expected, which is, hey, it's slightly, like, I mean very, very slightly faster than a 13900K non-S and costs a lot more. So really the only people who would be interested in this would be people who are very interested in extreme overclocking and want the binned chip. Because other than that, why would you spend over $100 more on the MSRP for like 2% more performance? It doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. Now, I thought this tweet was interesting. This is from Neo, who make handheld gaming computers, sort of Steam Deck competitor type devices. Now, what was really interesting to me about this one, talking about their Next 2 coming in 2023, is that it mentions not just a next-gen 7000 series CPU, they also mention new discrete graphics. Now that's interesting because unless this is a typo, and you would think, and it's not just in the tweet, it's on one of their marketing slide shots here as well. It would be really interesting to see discrete graphics on this type of device. Usually you get integrated graphics onto like the APU. If there was actually a discrete graphics card in this form factor, first of all, that would probably give it a huge performance edge over the competition. However, I can't help but wonder what that would mean about the battery life, because, you know, even a pretty power efficient mobile GPU, like maybe would this be like the 7600S we saw? Like I think even its lowest power configurations, that would still be like 50 watts, which I would think would just blaze through the battery life of a device like this. Might be interested plugged in. I don't know, but I'm just curious about that. Now, another thing I hate right now is 7000 series CPU from AMD. Well, according to their new mobile CPU naming scheme, that does not necessarily mean it's on the new Zen 4 architecture. It could be Zen 3 or even Zen 2, depending on what this third number actually ends up being on the CPU that we actually get integrated into that. But still thought it was pretty interesting. Now, speaking of some AMD GPUs, I thought these tests were really interesting at Computer Base. So a while back, there was a driver update that was reported to help like power consumption during something like watching a YouTube video, which was something that people criticized at launch. Now, what that driver update did not mention was any energy efficiency improvements while gaming. However, while there does not seem to be any noticeable difference in energy usage while gaming normally, because here was the this driver versus the launch driver and just playing Doom Eternal, no difference. If you frame cap it to 144 frames per second, then there actually was a fairly massive difference in performance. So where the launch drivers, you know, if you set those like if you set the 7900 XTX performance at 100% power usage, you can click these in their chart. I'll have this link in the description. The whole review does a whole lot more. But you see that the XTX on this newer driver was only drawing 64% of that power. And again, they're both capped to 144 frames per second in the same game. So it does seem to have done something for the energy efficiency while gaming, but only if you are frame rate limiting. But that is interesting because a lot of people do frame rate cap to their monitor's max refresh rate, especially when you're gaming at single player. So that's interesting. If you want a lot more details on that, again, check the link in the description. But speaking of AMD's GPUs, the big elephant in the room is the failure rate of the coolers on the reference model specifically. So remember, if you're getting a custom XTX cooler, shouldn't be an issue, but the made by AMD reference design. Now, a lot of people have been curious how many of these are failing. Now, this WCCF Tech article, and I've seen a whole bunch of other articles reporting this 11% number, and I was curious, where is this 11% failure rate number coming from? Because that sounds really high. Apparently, that was reported by Igor's lab when you dig into it. Now, Igor's lab is, I think, just kind of citing his own sources from AIB card manufacturers. So one thing I want to caution people on is, I don't know if that 11% number, I've seen a lot of articles running with that as if it's just a 100% fact. It's a number that Igor's lab has stated, but it's unclear how he knows that that is 100% accurate as the total number. Anyway, he's also bringing up the fact that people trying to get replacements for them have been told that they're kind of out of stock for replacing them, and they do offer refunds instead. Now, this article's a number of days old at this point, so I don't know if supply has improved since then, but I did want to mention that. Another thing I want to mention is if you do have the reference model, and maybe you just want to keep it, but maybe you do have the issue and just want to improve the cooling overall, maybe you're interested in water cooling, AlphaCool has introduced water blocks now that are compatible with the reference RX 7900 XTX and XT model. Now remember, the XT model is not reported to be having this cooling issue, but if you do just want to water cool it. Now they also, this is a press release from them, and they have a bunch, some NVIDIA ones as well, but I did want to just draw your guys' attention to these reference model compatible water blocks, if that's something that you are interested in. Now, speaking of other GPU cooler news, looks like MSI has launched a GeForce RTX 4090 Suprim X Classic version. So basically, this goes back to being much closer to the design on their 3090 Ti Suprim X versus the newer 4090 model that they launched with. There's a few small differences between the two, but that seems to be the main idea. And what I think is really interesting cooler news, but I shouldn't dwell on it too long, is this blower-style RTX 4090. A user gave a whole bunch of info on this on Reddit. Now, this is completely non-branded because I think that this would violate NVIDIA's regulations. They don't want blower-style 4090s out there because they want the people using these in enterprise workloads for like AI and things like that, and just professional applications on that level, to be buying their professional series graphics cards. So they don't want them in this form factor. However, there's a blower-style 3090 versus the 4090. There's a lot of interesting screenshots here. It does save a lot of room in the case, and that's why this user seemed to be interested in it, according to the Reddit post, is that it would fit inside of his case, whereas the normal 4090 coolers would not. And then, but does it actually stay cool and perform? He did release some time spy results here, and it does seem to, while it's not blowing the charts off of the results compared to other 4090s, it does stack up okay against the average results on Time Spy if you compare those numbers. But guys, this was the thing I was most interested in, the fan speed. So the fan speed on this card seems to be going over 5,000 RPMs at times. And if you read the Reddit post, he did mention like needing noise-canceling headphones to sit in the room with this thing while it's working. There's Time Spy Extreme, and again, the fan speed's going over 5,000. But the temperature's staying at least, within spec. Like it is able to perform. So anyway, I thought that was interesting, but we shouldn't dwell on it. That's going to be not most people's typical use case or something they're interested in. However, you might be interested in this. Micron has unveiled 24 gigabyte and 48 gigabyte DDR5 memory modules that are AMD Expo and XMP 3.0 compatible. Now, this would be really interesting because it could give you depending on pricing for me, because it would give you different options for your memory configuration. We've seen a lot of games, if you watch my system requirement videos, starting to recommend 32 gigabytes and all of that. But maybe you want to have 32, maybe you want to have more than 32, maybe you want 48, maybe 64 seems overkill, so 224s. Anyway, it's just interesting to have more options. There's some more specs available here in the Tom's Hardware article on the topic. It looks like these are rated at 5200 and 5600 and CL46. Although I wonder if these could be, improved speed-wise overall. But anyway, this does seem to be opening up some more options, which is always a good thing to me. Now, I meant to throw this in with the other cooler models, but we'll do it here. It looks like Gunner is offering a new Arc A770 Photon. Now, most A770s have 8 gigabytes of memory, except for the limited edition models, and I think there's also like a Bifrost version from, who did the Bifrost? Whatever. Anyway, the point is, it's looking like there's another 16 gigabyte version available now, and this is in China, at least at the moment. But what's kind of interesting about this is if you look at the specs, the clock speeds, the memory speeds are 16 gigabit per second instead of the limited edition version's 17.5. And it looks like the Bifrost version does also go up to that 17.5. So this is a little bit of a different sort of beast overall, although its graphics clock is 14.3% faster than the reference model. In other Intel GPU news, we are seeing a new Intel graphics driver recently. This looks like it's mainly fixing some problems with Fortnite's DX12 in high-end epic graphics settings. What's interesting to me there is it's the high-end epic graphics presets that enable the new Unreal Engine 5 features, like Lumen, Nanite, that kind of a thing. So I wonder if this is helping compatibility with, you know, Unreal Engine 5 features, those new ones. And then it also looks like they're helping out with Sonic Frontiers in DX11 mode, fixing some texture rendering and corruption, but it looked like that was the standouts. There's a lot of further known issues and all of that going on there. Let's do some real quick Apple news. So Apple did unveil the new M2 Pro and M2 Max hardware. Seems like, according to them at least, you never know what to make of their slides, it is going to be noticeably faster. In like code compiling, you know, 25% faster than the M1 Pro, that kind of a thing. Image processing in Photoshop, 40% faster. So we'll have to see what actually makes of it. My channel focuses more on gaming performance, and, you know, Macs, at least for now, do not really seem to be targeting the gaming market, although they are doing some interesting things there. I don't want to dwell on that at this point. However, don't try to trade in your old Mac Pro to help you pay for the new one with Apple, because there's an interesting tweet here saying from David Imel, just tried pricing out our $52,199 Mac Pros at the office for trade-in value from Apple, and they offered him $970. So Apple always, you know, friendly on the pricing. Anyway. Video's getting long, so I might not dwell on this. Just mentioning that there's some mention of MSI motherboards, and it's unclear if this would be other motherboard manufacturers as well, not actually really following the secure boot guidance, actually just letting you run any kind of code, and these are on their consumer line. Honestly, there's reasons why that might actually be more convenient for the end user rather than a bad thing, but anyway, I'll leave this article up in my description. Let's get through a few other real quick stories before I have to get my kids up for school. So Stadia is officially dead now. So, you know, the death had been announced as upcoming, and it has now occurred. However, I'm really, really happy that they have made the Bluetooth made the controller actually get an update to be just usable as a Bluetooth controller for other uses, so those controllers will not just become e-waste. They did go ahead and do that. A lot of people were hoping they would, and they did. So I'll just leave it at that. Stadia is dead. The controllers are not. They are usable as Bluetooth controllers now. Also, we're seeing reports that the PSVR 2 is unlikely to work on PC, according to the developer who worked on PSVR 1 compatibility on PC. He's saying that if it ever did work, it would probably take years to develop any kind of way of making it happen. So I have seen people mention on my channel in comments that they're excited for the PSVR 2 and will it work on PC. So it's sounding like no, at least not anytime soon. Now, also, my Hogwarts Legacy system requirements video is getting a lot of traction. People seem interested in this game. Now, in that video, there was some speculation on were any of those specs using ray tracing. I still can't answer were the system requirements listed using any sort of ray tracing, but WB Games has tweeted out some information on what kind of ray tracing support will be available in the game. They can confirm there's ray tracing options for shadows, reflections, ambient occlusion, and quality presets. Now, it would be really cool to see ray trace global illumination as an option, but this does at least look like there's a lot of stuff going to be available, and again, that'll be a fun thing to test out when the game launches. I probably will try to get some benchmarks out for that. Excuse me. Now, in other game updates, F122 has been updated to support FSR 2.2. I believe previously it just had FSR 1.0, so that's a nice update, and it is going to the FSR 2.2 version. Looks like there's a few other minor changes to the game along with this update. Plague Tale Requiem, which I think has already been one of the best-looking games ever made without any ray tracing, has now been updated with a ray tracing patch. Now, it's only ray traced shadows, which to me is unfortunate because of all the ray tracing effects, shadows to me just aren't that mind-blowing, although I haven't tested it out in this particular game yet, so we'll see. I thought the game looked great already. I would have been more interested in like RT reflections for the water or something like that, but hey, it is what it is. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of tech companies, including Microsoft, looking like they're slashing jobs, but that can be hitting some of the major game development studios as well, like Microsoft's Bethesda, the Coalition, and even 343. Reportedly being hit, although it's unclear at this time exactly which positions are being cut. I hate to see the Halo developers getting hit with that, given how long it seems to take them to update the content in their game already, but I'll just end the video right here at the 30-minute mark. I hope all of you have an excellent day.